I gotta keep the camera off for just a little bit. Sorry, I had to breathe there for just a second. Hopefully, this stream won't be as sporadic as yesterday's, but I make no promises. My head's all over the place. And no, I'm not trying to go for a very serious, Batman-esque tone there. So this was one of the ideas I mentioned at the end of last night's stream. Only a little bit different because I'm not going to be discussing both Tony and Bruce in this one, swapping places. I'm only going to exploring what would happen if Tony Stark had the life of Bruce Wayne, more or less. Thank you for that compliment. Now, I'm not going to be changing anything about the core character, so long as it doesn't conflict with Tony becoming Batman. I'm coming at this from the perspective that Tony Stark is actually much more intelligent than Bruce Wayne. Naturally so. Right? Bruce is smart. But notice how it's always a bit ridiculous when they make him more intelligent than he has any reason to be. But with Tony, it just feels more natural. Even especially in the movies. He doesn't just talk like somebody who pretends to be a scientist and know things. He actually knows them. Now, don't get me wrong. Bruce is smart. But he shouldn't be this character with like 3, 4, 5 PhDs. The whole point of Bruce Wayne as Batman is to be a crime fighter and a genius detective. Nothing about being a detective correlates with being a physicist and a engineer. Hello, Experience Vista. So, what's going to be kept from Tony as Iron Man is the fact that he always looks towards the future and to advance the gear that he's using. Because that's a core element of his character that I don't think should be taken. Otherwise, he might as well just be Bruce Wayne with a different name. And as for the inciting incident that leads him to becoming Batman, that might need to change slightly, because again, he still kind of needs to be Tony Stark. He can't be this dark and brooding individual. Now, it's also true that our reactions or response to trauma can differ from person to person. We know that Tony, made even more prevalent in the comics than in the MCU, is, or at least was, an alcoholic. What if what happened to his parents, who are obviously going to be the Starks, is what eventually leads to him becoming an alcoholic? Now, that does, I'm aware, kind of go against the whole Batman thing, because he's supposed to be strong in mind, body, and spirit. But this is a Batman who's going to invest more of his time into. Hold on a second. I'll This is a Batman who is focused more on the technological aspect. He's not interested in going around and getting into fist fights with thugs and supervillains like Bruce Wayne's Batman does. He will still do that, but to make sure that we don't fundamentally change Tony Stark's personality and view on things, whilst also making it so that he can be Batman in this verse. How do I advance my tech to be a better crime fighter is going to be his main concern. Now, another thing that's going to be different about this Batman, the Tony Stark one, is that he doesn't go after every criminal. That's not his focus. Not to stop crime. His focus is stopping crimes of a specific nature. So, my thinking is this Batman is trying to do two things: avenge his parents, but more so be focused on thinking about what would make his parents proud of him. Both Tony and Batman kind of seem to be seeking the approval of their fathers, which they'll never get because they're not living, right? But for Tony, it's more like he feels as though he failed him. Bruce, deep down, I don't think believes that. He might question that when he has conversations with Alfred from time to time. But that's like only in that one episode where Scarecrow made him doubt himself through the fear toxin. I don't think he truly believes that his father would be disappointed in him. Or maybe he does because he chose to become Batman and, be a crime fighter and so on and so forth. He seemed to have a better childhood, even though they were gone when he was very young and he saw them be taken from him, like, literally right in front of him. Right, it happened literally right in front of him. So how do we change the origin so that Tony Stark doesn't become pretty much a carbon copy of Bruce Wayne, but also adhering to the disciplines somewhat? He still needs to go and train himself physically and mentally, but as has been established, he's also much more interested in the tech side of things than Batman ever was. Which, in a weird way, is going to make this version of Batman kind of more like Black Panther. 'Cause I've seen people describe Black Panther as essentially being Marvel's Batman. Now, that's been said for Daredevil too, but here's the thing. Daredevil can't really be Marvel's Batman when he's a poor lawyer. To be Batman, you have to be rich. And you have to be, not to say that Matt Murdock isn't smart, but you have to be of genius level intellect. Both things T'Challa is. Now, yes, there's obviously the huge difference in that T'Challa is royalty. So, royalty slash a more modern way to look at it would be the head of a country. He's a king, but, he'd probably be more comparable to, like, a president who just has more power than your average president. He's technically a monarch, but based on the movie, it seems to me as though T'Challa is not a king who wants to rule over his people. He wants to rule for his people. But that's getting off topic. So, we're probably going to have to change... Well, no. Not going to have to change anything, because, again, this isn't Tony Stark being raised by Bruce Wayne's parents. His parents are still the Starks. They're just in Gotham now. In a DC universe. Which means that this version of Batman is not going to have a father who was, if I'm not mistaken, I think Thomas Wayne was a doctor and more specifically a surgeon. I don't remember anything about Martha Wayne. Yes, I'm sure someone's going to want to say, why did you say that name? But anyway. I don't remember anything about Martha Wayne. I feel like she was basically just a homemaker. And not, in the literal sense. Alfred, and I'm imagining they had maids, would have been the ones to handle that side of things, right? They're rich. Plus, Thomas and Martha, I would imagine, were kind of like the closest you could get to a perfect marriage. Two people clearly in love with each other. Truly. And they wanted to be partners in everything they did. So that means that Stark Enterprises in Gotham is still more or less doing what it does in the Marvel Universe. Now, here's a question. Sorry about that. Something dropped. Nothing to be alarmed about. Here's the question. What the heck was that? Here's a question. Is Alfred still a thing? Or do we replace him with Jarvis? Apologies for that background noise. That's me opening the garage door. I should have muted the volume on the stream before, you know, um, opening it, but I forgot to. Anyway, is Alfred still a thing? In my opinion, Alfred is integral, regardless of whether or not it's Bruce as Batman or Tony Stark. That is the one thing, well, one of the things that will be kept. This Batman will also still have to, yeah. This Batman will also still have to have the same rogues gallery. The Joker being his main villain and so on and so forth. But they'll have to be fundamentally different. His Joker is probably going to be more like the Green Goblin than just a typical crazy all over the place psychopath who is just known for being incredibly violent and insane. And yes, I'm well aware of the fact that Green Goblin is that as well. But Green Goblin, in a weird way, is like a fusion of Joker and Lex Luthor. So, we'll keep Alfred. We'll keep the method by which Tony loses his parents, which ironically is not too dissimilar from what happens in the MCU. It's not in an alley, but they are taken out by Winter Soldier, who obviously does not exist in the DC universe. So, and, since... Is it going to be someone that was just trying to rob them? Or is it going to be someone with more of a personal vendetta? It could be a mix of both. But again, outside of Tony and his parents, nothing else is really going to carry over from the Marvel Universe. Now, that means, and I forgive me because I haven't really read the comics. I've read newer comics, but I don't really know exactly what happens to Tony's parents. I don't feel like, canonically speaking, within the realm of the comics, just within the MCU, we know that, it was a secret. It was Winter Soldier, and yeah, I guess that means that Hydra targeted him. So, and I don't know exactly what Howard was doing. I believe he was pretty much what Tony was, but with, much less advanced technology. I'm fairly certain that he was a weapons manufacturer. Now, obviously, there's not going to be a Captain America here. So does that mean there's not going to be a Super Soldier program? Or does that mean that someone else in the DC universe more or less has to take the place of Cap. Here's an interesting idea for you. What if we reinvent one of Batman's um, major villains? Wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. I take that back. There is a Captain America of sorts in DC. I can't believe I almost forgot about him. But he's not a hero. And that would be Deathstroke. He's more or less a super soldier. So because I was going to go with Ra's al Ghul and say that the super soldier serum is what made him go crazy and decide that, there needs to be a reset button on humanity. But now I'm thinking, no, we've already got Slade Wilson. I believe that's his last name. I could be mistaken. AKA Deathstroke. So why would we need to change? Why would we need to potentially fundamentally change one of Batman's villains, needlessly? So we'll say that Slade was the recipient of the super soldier serum created by Tony Stark. Tony Stark, sorry. Howard Stark. Wait, I'm sorry. What am I talking about? The serum wasn't created by Howard Stark. It was created by, I forget the guy's name. I think he was a German scientist. Yeah, what am I talking about? So that means there doesn't need to be one at all. Although we can still play with that through Slade, because, just without the connection to Howard. And I really don't like the idea of Slade being like frozen in ice, frozen solid for like 100 years and then being thawed out. Like, in all honesty, if we were gonna do that, it'd make much more sense for that to be Mr. Freeze, because could explain his condition. So we'll say that we'll say that Howard invented something. And somebody else more or less had the same idea. And made and claimed that Howard stole his idea. And he wanted to completely destroy Howard Stark. He wanted to take everything he had. Now, Tony is still going to need to grow up with seemingly limitless amount of wealth to become Batman, right? So we'll just say that he this person succeeds to some extent. And I'm struggling because I'm thinking about some of Batman's rogues, and I feel like this character would have to be one of Batman's main villains. The problem is, if this villain existed during the time that Stark's parents passed, it would mean that we'd have to like age up one of Batman's rogues significantly. And I don't like that idea. So how do you go about that? Well, okay. Here's a potentially interesting way to do it. Problem is that this would make this character the Tony Stark version of Batman. It would make this character his main adversary, which means that the Joker wouldn't be, and that kind of destroys everything. I was gonna suggest Victor Freeze, but once again, the Joker still has to be Batman's recognized as his main adversary. And I want to keep the more morally vague aspect of Mr. Freeze intact. And again, this character can't become the Joker because he'd be old by the time that Tony becomes Batman. And this person still get the whole point of the Joker, even though I don't like the idea of the Joker's identity never being known and him being a mystery, this would destroy that. So what do you do? I guess we'll just say that this individual doesn't become a major villain. Like he, gets arrested, is thrown in jail. Whatever he's taken is given back to Tony Stark, and Alfred raises him like he does Bruce, more or less. Now, I don't think we run into any major problems as Tony is flying around and studying and no, I'm not going to scream for you. Not unless it is um relevant to the stream. I could shout an iconic Batman or Iron Man quote that they shouted, but I'm not just going to do it because I'm going to change some things about the Batman mythos. That actually really bother me. Number one, Master of every martial art on the planet. Completely unnecessary. Because the vast majority of his foes don't even know how to fight themselves. Only one of the, well, okay, more than one of them, but like only two or three, possibly four, are accomplished fighters in any respect. And his knowledge of every martial art style is not going to be needed for taking on Bane, nor is it going to be necessary for taking on Ra's al Ghul. I'm trying to think if there's any. I mean, yeah, there's the newer Batman villains, like, well, only one comes to mind, but Prometheus. But again, knowing every single martial art style is not going to matter. Especially since this version of Batman is more driven by wanting to improve the tech he uses and less about running around on rooftops to punch people in the face. And I think he can still inspire fear without running around in a mask and suit. Um, Possibly even more so. Um, so yeah, he's not gonna go around and learn every martial arts style. That's ridiculous. Because the whole point of Batman is that he's supposed to be a normal man. A normal human being, even in comics, is not going to be able to go around and learn every martial arts style. As superhuman as Tony Stark becomes, it's all directly tied to his armors. He does learn some fighting techniques from Captain America, but I mean, okay, yeah, maybe you could argue that Captain America know more than the average person because he's from the past, but he's not like Wolverine where he's lived through centuries, right? And um Tony is not a genius in every form of science. If he was, he wouldn't be Iron Man. He'd be something else. The point of Iron Man is that the suit pretty much does all the fighting for him, and that he's working towards building better sources of energy for the work, right? Like, so I don't even think he needs to study criminal psychology and whatnot like Batman does. I think he could just as easily just study computer programming, um, physics, although I don't know which type. Maybe nuclear? Although I'm also aware of the fact that everyone who studies physics learns some degree of nuclear physics. This was said to me by a friend of mine who did study to become a physicist, an astrophysicist. So, yeah, he studies that, and then he also studies engineering. And that would be more than enough for him to just program a software and computer that can do all that digging for him. I mean, is it really necessary for him to be like a master in chemistry? Like, that wasn't the way I wanted to say it. Is it really necessary for Batman to have, like, let's say, a master's or even a PhD in chemistry when he uses the Bat computer? Well, like, he relies on that computer to help him with solving a lot of his crimes. If he's just gonna learn everything to do with like criminology and whatnot, then why does he need the computer, right? Like, okay, to map things out, but he uses that computer to find answers. And actually, Tony does understand chemistry because chemistry is involved in the production of explosives, and he obviously has built weapons for the military. Okay, so chemistry is still there, or enough to, you know, to get by. And honestly, Tony, in his own right, is a pretty capable detective without having gone to study that. Investigation and solving problems is a big part of being a scientist. So he doesn't even need to go and learn like criminal psychology and all that. Oops, sorry about that. So, with that being the case, how does he still become a symbol of fear? And how does he still choose to model his suit and aesthetic after a bat? Here's an idea. We'll say that during his travels, which were mainly just to help him get well and receive education, he basically went on a long vacation, right? Trained in martial arts, and that was for the purposes of strengthening his mind to help deal with the trauma of losing his parents. And the other studies were because he had an interest in science, right? He had an interest in more or less doing what his father did. Um, And we'll say that he also somehow ends up in a cave, but he isn't taken by by criminals or anything and forced to make weapons for them. No, an accident happens, and he and Alfred get stuck in a cave somehow, or I don't think the specifics are that necessary. And we'll just say, to make it easy, that he has enough resources to make a suit out of. And in the cave, there's almost no light. Well, actually, there is no light for all intents and purposes. I apologize for that. I can't help the fact that there are sirens. Anyway. And so, while in the dark, Tony's kind of freaking out, right? He's in a cave. Yes, Alfred's there. Alfred is conscious. Alfred is trying to talk to him as best as he can. But we'll say that being in a dark cave reminds him of what happened to his parents, and while he's able to deal, it's kind of it's making him shaking him up a bit. And he thinks about how dark it is and how he wishes he could see. He wishes they could see. He wishes they had a light source. So, somehow, some way, Tony starts thinking about bats. Maybe he remembers a time when he was a kid where a bat had gotten in the house and it freaked him out. And his father came to talk to him and said, I know it's scary hearing, those squeaking sounds and knowing that there's a bat in the house, but it's completely harmless. And then his father took it a step further and said, something that can help you deal with your fears? And we'll say that this wasn't like a one night thing. This was like a bat that was there for a while, and for whatever reason, they just couldn't get it out for like a week. He says, what can help people deal with their fears? Learning more about what they're afraid of. And so he basically, I don't know, maybe he finds a bunch of books on bats and even takes Tony to see bats. I don't think there. I don't. I guess we could say that there's like that maybe the Gotham Zoo has like a bat enclosure or something. I don't know. And even though this doesn't really make sense for Tony to do, let's just say that he becomes fascinated with bats. And he's in the cave with Alfred, they managed to find a flare. Because again, all their stuff is with them. We'll say that they went into the cave for some reason, but then something blocked their way, and they couldn't get out. There was a cave in or something. And there is a way out. They find the flare, and they discover there is a way out. The problem is, so there's like a hole big enough for a fairly large hole that two people could squeeze through. Like, the problem is there's no foreseeable way. There's no. They don't have climbing equipment, and we could say that was lost. What they do have, however, is the materials necessary to build something to allow them to fly out of the cave. And this is basically where Tony builds what in the DC universe is known as, I don't know if the suit itself has a name, but this is where he builds the suit that in the DC in the the real world DC universe, it's the suit that Terry McGinnis uses. That is this Batman's very first suit. Although probably a slightly less advanced version. It doesn't have like the ability to turn invisible or the more advanced things. It's just able to fly. So it's a Batman Beyond suit that just basically functions as a jetpack. And I don't know why he would want to look like a bat. Maybe it's just because he's designing it and this looks cool. Anyway. Or no, better yet, he just builds a jetpack. Yeah. And he and Alfred fly out. And they manage to, I don't know, maybe they go to a town and they call someone and they get out of there, and someone goes and maybe collects the stuff that was trapped in the cave with them. And so following this, we'll say that Tony is at a point now where he's basically ready to invent himself as Batman. The memory of his father and them bonding over learning about bats and him overcoming the fear he had as a kid is what inspires him to take up the moniker Batman, or at least at this point, create a suit that is styled to be like a bat, to be a bat. However, he kind of takes this suit, he kind of takes it a bit farther by making the suit more like a bat. And I don't mean physically speaking, I mean its capabilities. Bats have use echolocation to see, right? So Tony decides I'm gonna replicate that through technology. Now he's not gonna make himself blind while he's in the suit. Because then he'd basically be DC's Daredevil. What he is going to do, however, is work with sound. I'm thinking that his repulsor equivalent as Batman will be basically sonic blasts. In a weird way, it kind of makes him into Shriek from Batman Beyond. And he has designed the gloves to contain something in them that allows them to generate pulses. He can use this to amplify his voice. And he can even use it to not this part directly, but he has something in his helmet. Yes, I'm going to say that he has a helmet. His Batman. That allows him to increase his hearing. Maybe he even has something that like messes with the hearing of criminals, and it can kind of give him like vertigo or something like that. So it's not like giving the suit echolocation, but I think it still fits for a more technologically focused Batman to have more or less weaponry that's sound based, and other tech on board that's sound based. We could even say, actually, to tie more in with the fear aspect of Batman, that he will produce sounds of various things that could terrify someone to psychologically mess with them. Which could, in time, lead to him including holographic technology through which to produce images of those things as well as their sounds. One major difference that I'm sure you are aware of is the fact that he doesn't have the whole shrapnel. Uh, he doesn't have the arc reactor uh, in his chest. But I don't think you need that. Especially since this is a more physically capable Tony Stark. He's trained in the martial arts. I mean, okay, yeah, the arc reactor doesn't seem to cause any problems because it literally prevents the shrapnel from getting to his heart, but you know what? No. Well, maybe we do have still go with the arc reactor, but it's like it's built by Tony, and Alfred somehow like manages to save him from something that happened to him. We'll say that we'll basically do a recreation of what happens in Iron Man 1 where I think his name is Jensen creates basically a very crude reactor. It's more of a battery and magnet that keeps the shrapnel from getting to Tony's heart. And so we'll say that that happens here. It's just I'm not sure how the shrapnel gets there. Um, Maybe they had some equipment with them that exploded and the shrapnel hit Tony. And Alfred had to build something to prevent that from getting to him because he, wasn't able to perform surgery. Because I don't know if this is always the case, but in one version of Batman, Alfred was a medic in the military, or he might have even been some kind of a doctor. But I'm pretty sure he's always former military in some way. So anyway, he's working on the suit. Again, he decides on a bet. He has the shrapnel removed as well as the arc reactor, but he doesn't discard it because, like in the MCU, even though the arc reactor is not in Tony anymore, it's still built into the suits. It's now basically quite literally in the suits themselves. And so we'll just say that this arc reactor is built into a Batman suit. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's way too much power for a Batman suit. Or we could say that this arc reactor, what it powers, what it does for the Batman suit is that it powers all the sonic based stuff. It powers the flight capabilities. It powers the onboard computer that allows him to like scan things, and if it's dark, like he'll even be able to like it'll give him like night vision and whatnot. Um, Maybe we could even say that like the eyes would be, there's kind of like, I don't want to say flashlights, but they're kind of more akin to like headlights. Ugh. Sorry for yawning just then. Um. So yeah. Oh, and this Batman suit also has some technology in it that allows Tony to amp up his physical strength as needed. And the arc reactor would be used for that too. Sorry about that. I was just checking a message. Sorry about that. I was just checking a message. Or checking for something. So I think that's enough for now. I'm going for over an hour at this point. Maybe I can do another stream, like a part two to this one, where we discuss the changes for some of Batman's villains. Well, not some of, but probably all of them. And more about how this Batman works. So, um, before I end the stream, I'll just ask if anybody has any questions or comments. I'll go until an hour and 10 minutes before ending the stream and doing my outro. All right. I'm not seeing any comments, not seeing any questions of any sort. So let's wrap it up. I want to thank you all once again for joining me for today's stream. Um, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, as well as comment any feedback you may have, or just questions you may have, or if you just want to say hi. Um, and as always, that goes to for those who will see this as an uploaded stream. To please consider leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing. And as always, the truth is, I am Iron Man.